Okay, so happy Easter. Do we have big plans today? Dinners, Easter egg hunts, things like that? Probably most of us have something going on. So I want to first share a story with you. There were three less than common sense people, this is the politically correct way to say this, who died and went to the pearly gates with St. Peter. And so St. Peter says, in order to get into heaven, you have to answer one question. So he said, you've got to tell me, what is Easter? So the first less than common sense person says, oh, I know. Easter is that day in November when we get together and we eat turkey and we talk about what we're grateful for. And St. Peter looks at him and he's like, no. So he looks at the next less than common sense person and said, can you tell me what is Easter? And this one's like, really psyched. Yes, I know what Easter is. Easter is when we put up the tree and we sing all these songs and we give gifts to each other. And St. Peter looks and he's like, no. So at this point, he's not really thinking any of them are going to know. So he goes to the third one, and the third one's very confident and says, yeah, I absolutely know. So St. Peter's kind of incredulous, like, okay. So he says, Easter is the Christian holiday that coincides with the Jewish celebration of Passover, where Jesus and his disciples have the Last Supper, and one of the disciples betrays Jesus, and then Jesus is arrested. And then Jesus is crucified, and then he is put into a tomb. And so St. Peter's just like, wow, he's got his eyebrow raised and wow, this is great. And the guy goes on and he says, and once a year, the stone is rolled away from the tomb and Jesus comes out. And if he sees his shadow, it's going to be another 6 weeks of winter. I need my drummer up here. Ba-dum-bum. I think in many ways the message of Easter has gotten very convoluted and is taught very differently in a number of places, and that's perfectly fine. But I do want to share with you today that in Unity we do not celebrate Easter as a day where we see Jesus as one who died for our sins. Rather, we celebrate Easter as a day when we look at that Jesus lived for our great awakening, and that we are not miserable sinners trying to find our way into heaven. My friends, we are born into original blessing. We were not born into this world marred in any way, that instead we were born into this world as individual, diverse, divine expressions of God. We are not trying to find our way into eternity. The reality is that we are in eternity right now, and we are at this moment eternal beings. We are not trying to find our way to immortality. We are already immortal beings. We are not weak, pitiful human beings, but we are powerful spiritual beings inhabiting an incredibly miraculous body with a thinking mind and emotions and reasoning faculties. The reality is that we are glorious, magnificent expressions of God, and we are here to express the goodness, the love, the oneness, and the truth that Jesus taught us. That is our message today and always. Yes, that is who we are. And I love our message. So that's who we are. So the title of today's talk is Rolling Stones. Gonna get my picture on the cover. Gonna buy. I mean, my first thought goes obviously to the band and then to that song. But we're not talking about the band today or the song. We're talking about stones that perhaps are standing in the way of what is our greatest expression of our Christ light. And the way that I want to express this to you this morning is by telling you more of the story that's shared in Scripture. Now, I'm going to share with you some things from Elizabeth Sand-Turner's book, Your Hope of Glory. Elizabeth Sand-Turner is a Unity author. She has 3 books, and they really give you a lot of a light on the Gospels, and she gives you some metaphysical interpretation. So it's really wonderful, wonderful material. So last week we talked about Palm Sunday, and that Palm Sunday was the beginning of what we call Holy Week. And so on Thursday night, the the disciples are gathered and they're having the Last Supper. Well, first let me say this. Let us remember, first of all, that Jesus was a radical. Jesus was a rebel in his time, that he came along and he started telling people things that they had never heard before. He started telling them things that they didn't believe were possible, and he was telling things that that weren't necessarily in alignment with the laws that Moses had laid down. So Jesus was getting an incredible amount of attention from the Jewish leaders and from the Jewish religious communities. So, okay, so now we're going to go. So we have the Last Supper. He's betrayed. He's arrested. So now Jesus is going to have two trials. He's going to have a civil trial and a religious trial. And I think that this story is so relevant for what is happening right now in our community and other places in our country. Okay, so the first trial is going to be the religious trial. So he is first taken to a high priest who used to be in the position of being the high priest over the Temple of Jerusalem. And he's no longer that person, but he wields a lot of power, and his name is Annas. So they take him to Annas, and Annas asked him what his teachings are. And Jesus says to him, I have never preached in secret. I've always taught out in public, so why don't you just go ask some of the people who have heard my messages? And Annas thought that was pretty disrespectful. So he sent him on to, and I think it's Caiaphas. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that's what it looks like. And Caiaphas is Annas' son-in-law, and he is now the high priest of the Jewish temple. So he goes to Caiaphas, and Caiaphas quickly calls together members of the Sanhedrin. Now, the Sanhedrin are like the Supreme Court of the Jewish temple. So he quickly calls people together because he wants to get people there that are going to support him. And he asks Jesus, are you the Christ, the Son of God? And Jesus responds by saying, this is Matthew 26, 63, 64, you have said so. But I tell you hereafter that you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Well, they decided that meant that he said yes. And so cries of blasphemy ring out in this area, and they're saying, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. So they've decided that's what they want to do. So now he has to go to the next part of the religious trial, and that is he is going to the Sanhedrin. Again, this is like the Supreme Court. So he goes before the Sanhedrin, and of course they say, crucify him. He's a blasphemer, crucify him. But they do not have the authority to follow this through. They would have to stone him to death in order for them to be able to do it, and they wanted him crucified. So only the Roman procurator, I had to practice that word so many times, Pontius Pilate had this power. Now, Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, says that the religious trial of Jesus shows how a merely formal religion will persecute and attempt to kill the inner Christ spirit and all that pertains to it. Excuse me. And so it's the recognition that when we're coming just from that merely formal religion, we often lose sight of the real Christ aspect of each other and of life itself. So Jesus is then taken to Pontius Pilate, and he asks them what charge that they have against him. And so they come up with all these volleys of accusations. And the thing is, and I think I'm going to have a cough drop if somebody has one. Sorry, I just have a dry spot. Okay. So they know, thank you so much, Don. Wonderful, thank you. Ask and you shall receive. It's just that easy. It's so great. So the Sanhedrin know that they cannot just say that he's a blasphemer because Pilate doesn't really care for the Jewish religion. So what they do is they have to kind of invent a threat to the Roman government. And so what they say to Pilate is that Jesus has set himself up as a king. So this kind of sounds vaguely familiar to me with things that are being made up about bathroom issues and things like that and creating a lot of fear. Anybody recognize that in this time? Yeah. So Pilate asks him in John 18:33, are you the king of the Jews? And he says, my kingship is not of this world. You say that I am a king, for this I was born, and for this I have come into the world to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." So Pontius Pilate finds no guilt in him. So he takes him back out to the Jews and tells them, "I find no guilt in him." Well, they raise up in just anger again, and they want him crucified. So Pontius Pilate sends him to another high priest. This high priest also finds no guilt in him, brings him back. People are still demanding that they crucify Jesus. And so Pontius Pilate says, well, maybe I can just have the Roman soldiers scourge him, which means to whip him or lash him, and that will appease them. So he sends Jesus to the Roman soldiers. They beat him, they bring him back. He stands them in front of the Jewish people again, and he says, "Here he is, and I still find no guilt in him." And they put so much pressure on him, and ultimately the pressure was that if you don't do this and the Roman Empire gets word of this, then you may lose your position and you may also be murdered. And so ultimately what happens is that Pilate gives in. He says you can either choose Barabbas or you can choose Jesus, and you can choose one of them to release. And Barabbas was a known criminal, and they said, "Crucify Jesus, crucify Jesus." So, and as we know, some of our civil leaders may just not be able to stand fully in their power to stand for what's right. I think this is interesting in what's going on today. But Pilate did the best that he knew, the best that he could at that time. And so Jesus is given over to be crucified. Elizabeth Sand Turner says, and this was a turning point for me, I have to tell you, because I struggle. I've been very honest about this. I've struggled with this. I struggle with just feeling so frustrated and angry sometimes at the things that are being said, and how our community can even think to discriminate against anybody. So I struggle with this. Then I read this. The Jews, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees. The Pharisees were like the lawyers of that time. The Sadducees were the high priests. Represent spiritual blindness, and our attitudes towards those who caused the crucifixion of Jesus should be one of compassion rather than condemnation. The main points of Jesus' teachings are that we love God and we love our fellow human beings. And that's what it's about. It's about love, and it's about oneness. So I'm going to finish this story in a nutshell. The Roman soldiers took him, they stripped him, they mocked him, they put a crown of thorns on his head, they had him carry this huge heavy cross to the place where he would be executed. When they get there, they nail this man to the cross. I mean, we can't even begin to fathom what he has gone through. And they raise the cross up, and he's in the middle of two criminals. So the scene there at that point was it was a tumultuous time, and there were people who were silent, there were people who were sobbing, crying out, and there were people who were again mocking him, yelling out, "Save yourself, come down off of that cross." So here we are, and this is everything that's happened to this man. Again, we can't even begin to understand the incredible emotional and physical pain that he has gone through. And he says 7 phrases in the 6 hours that he was up on that cross. And I'm going to share just a few with you. But the first thing that he says is, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Wow. How many of us would that be our first words out of our mouth at that point? Thinking not so much. But he was such a master and showed us how we can do life differently. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Turner says that this saying was addressed to his persecutors and reveal his forgiving love. Unforgiveness is a most destructive emotion, and it is based on a lack of understanding. Those who are unjust to us know not what they do. For injustice breeds injustice for those who perpetrate it. We should pray for these people. Now hear this, doesn't mean we should pray for them to change their minds. We're just praying for them, for their goodness, for their happiness. And by doing this, we enter into the Christ forgiveness that cleanses us of the injustices we have committed unconsciously or deliberately. Anybody ever here feel like they have committed an injustice? Yeah. So it's a beautiful way that this flows. As we forgive, we are forgiven, not because there's a God outside of us who has to forgive us, but it frees us as we free others as well. So this is a huge stone here for us to remove. And it's the stone of unrighteous judgment, of condemnation, of separation, of blame, resentment, of ongoing anger towards others. And I'm going to tell you that I know that we can feel that our judgment is righteous. I'm going to tell you, I've gotten up on my little soapbox a number of times, and I just felt like my judgment is righteous. It never is. It never is. Because there's only love. And the thing that Jesus absolutely knew and what he portrayed to us is that he knew that love would win no matter what? Period. Because love is the one and only true power in the universe and in our lives. They could torture him. They could beat him. They could mock him. A group of pious people could stand there and think that they have killed the divine idea, but the divine idea that is love, the divine reality that is love, can never be murdered. It can never die, because it is the only true reality, period. And this is our goal. Our goal is to love as Jesus showed us. That's a big call, isn't it? That's a huge call for us. But he showed us that we can do that we can get there, that we can be that in expression in our lives. In our personal lives, with our family, our friends, our community, with organizations, people who totally disagree with us, we can absolutely get there. And Elizabeth Santurner says, but in order to do this, we need to attain a certain degree of spiritual understanding and development. She says, as Christians, we are endeavoring to attain this spiritual level now by releasing all criticism and prejudice, and by striving to manifest the Christ virtues of forgiveness, tolerance, and love. So how do we roll this stone away? How do we move this ginormous stone of judgment and unforgiveness and resentment and blame and frustration and anger? Matthew 5:44 tells us, but I say unto you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. And pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Oh, this is a big message for us today, isn't it? Because I know that there's a lot of people right here in this spiritual community, but we also know in our community at large, and again across the United States, that are definitely feeling very persecuted right now. But here's the thing, is that our job, no matter what, is to show up as love. Period. That's our job. That's what we're here for. We are here to be the divine expression of love. And if we stand in desiring oneness, and who's got to practice it? Acceptance, who's got to practice it? Diversity, who's got to practice it? Love, who's got to practice it? Because we can't wait for somebody outside of us to do it. We can't. That's not what it's about. You know, I kind of feel like it's no different than the idea here on Tuesdays to get everybody out to vote because everybody's vote matters. It's the same with this. Every single person, every one of us, choosing to show up as that Christ presence of love makes a difference. It matters. And when more of us remember to do that, we truly do hit that tipping point at some point. And we will get there. I have no doubt about it that we will get there. We just have to keep remembering to come back and show up as love. Now, I want to tell you there's another big stone, I think, that we have to move. And this really came from him saying something to one of the thieves. So the two thieves are on either side. One of them is mocking Jesus, and he says, hey, listen, you're the Savior. Get down off the cross, save yourself, and save us. Well, the other thief was very humble, and he reprimanded the first thief, and he said, hey, we're criminals. We deserve to be up here, but he doesn't. And this thief looks at Jesus and he says to him in Luke 23:42, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus says these words. He says, today you will be with me in paradise. Today you will be with me in paradise. Now, when I first read those words a number of years ago, I was just like, oh my gosh, because I'm going to tell you a couple things that this says. First of all, it clearly shows that Jesus didn't think he was like better than. You know, Jesus was just us. He was just one of us who had reached this amazing high consciousness. But this man was a convicted criminal. And Jesus essentially just looked at him and said, no worries, mate. There's only love. Here we go. We're all good in this. And that there is no worry about hell or a devil or something like that. And he also didn't say, hey, listen, do you believe in me? Do you accept me as your personal Savior? None of that. He looked at him and he said, today, you will be with me in paradise. And even more so than that, is in those moments, he was saying, I know who you are. You've just forgotten. But I know the divine being that you are. And I don't see anything but that. And so this other big stone that we have to roll away is a stone of self-condemnation. Anybody ever have self-criticism, condemnation, not enoughness? And what he's saying here is that, and the great commandment is what? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. If we are not loving ourselves, if we are not standing in the knowingness of the divine, beautiful, pure beings that we are, then we cannot see that in other people. We can see it in some people easily, but it's going to be a lot harder for some other people. But when we start to stand in and know you are perfect and beautiful just as you are today with everything that has brought you up to this point, you are a beautiful, perfect, divine being. It doesn't mean that I may not want to make some amends in my physical life if I can. It doesn't mean that I certainly want to learn and grow from my past experiences, but it hasn't changed who I really am. And that's who we want to start seeing. We want to start seeing that spiritual being, that perfect being, that beautiful, divine, powerful being that is the purity of love. And as we start doing that, we're able to start expressing that more and more and more. So it's rolling away the two big stones of unforgiveness, unrighteous judgment, and self-condemnation. So here's the thing about this. So we get to the resurrection and the ascension. And what I recognize is this is not a one-time deal for us. This is a lifelong journey for us. But here's what I know, is that every time that I'm able to find my way back and remember who I am, remember what I'm here for, and I'm able to show up in that place, it resurrects more of the Christ spirit that I am, and I ascend into a higher consciousness. And I think what Jesus showed us is that we can actually get to that full ascension to the point where it's no longer normal for us to judge. It's no longer normal for us to criticize or to condemn ourselves. But it becomes, what's normal is that we see each other and we just love each other and we just bless each other and we see ourselves. That's today, for this particular message, because there's a lot of ways to look at this Easter message, but today, that's the message that I have, is it's all about love. And love always wins, my friends. No matter where things go on Tuesday, I guarantee you love wins. And it will always win. And of course, my focus is going to be on victory on Tuesday, but you know what? Victory happens no matter what because a lot of awareness has been raised. And a lot more people are standing up and saying, you know, we are for each other. So there's victory anyway, but love will always win, period. And we have to just be the ones to express that no matter what. So your homework for this week is to just look at areas where you may be ready to roll those stones away of unforgiveness and criticism and unrighteous judgment, and also to roll the stone away of self-condemnation, and just to let your big, bright, brilliant beam of beautiful light shine. Just shine on, shine on, shine on. And together, my friends, together, this energy that comes from this place, that comes from each and every one of us, it lifts everything. Do not ever diminish you, yourself, your power, your goodness, your light, your truth, your love, your oneness, your joy, your hope. Don't ever diminish it. Just let it shine. And together, we are going to help love to win. Happy Easter! Namaste! Namaste.